This podcast is sponsored by A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London and Middlesex, both family-owned and operated. By Hyde Park Care Pharmacy. Experience the difference an independent pharmacy can make for you and your loved ones. Hyde Park Care Pharmacy offers personalized care, short wait time, very competitive pricing, easy transfer of your prescription, and much more. And by Molly Maid. During these times of COVID-19, it has never been more important to keep your family safe. With the Healthy Home Cleaning System, Molly Maid London is here to help. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today.
And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you may be on the World Wide Web. You have now entered into the room of the Vickers Crossing podcast. The Vickers Crossing is a virtual space where faith intersects with the public square. And it's good to have everybody back. I'm Rob Henderson from Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Memorial Anglican Church in London, Ontario.
Kevin George here from St. Aidan's Anglican Church, and I'm doing my best Peter Zosky impersonation.
And my name is Ian. I don't know who Peter Zosky is.
I was just going to say, he doesn't know who Peter Zosky is. We got him.
Ian, Peter Zosky was an incredible radio guy who was with the CBC and did the morning show for, I forget what they called. What was it called? Forgetting what name of the show was.
Like in the 1800s, Ian. So
yeah. Went on for about 25 or 30 years, I guess. Yeah. But
he did it by Morse code, the whole show.
The whole show was by Morse code with a cigarette hanging out the corner of his mouth.
That's right. Well, welcome back, everybody. We're glad you're here. We got a great podcast today coming up with a very special guest who is not in the room yet, obviously. And so full disclosure, we are recording and putting this part of our podcast together at a different time than our guest, right, guys? So,
yeah.
So when we get to our guest in just a few minutes, who is Michael Weir, not the golfer Mike Weir, but the gentleman named Michael Weir.
Michael Weir.
Weir. See, I said Weir. Yeah. When we get to him, Kevin will look different. I think Kevin had a beard when we met Michael Weir.
I might have.
And Ian won't be in the room because he was vacationing. Which
he was up in like Georgian Bay somewhere or something. Right. I don't know.
And I'll look exactly the same. So, but anyway, we're looking forward to talking to Michael here in just a minute. But first, as always, we want to say hi to our sponsors who help make all this happen on the podcast. First to A. Miller George Funeral Home, where each life is celebrated, and their sister company, Cremation London, Middlesex, both family owned and operated. And sending hello to Dave Mullen and the whole staff at A. Miller George.
Well, I should say hello to Carol Basada, who's over at Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, because this morning I doped up on some diabetic pills and some insulin and stuff. She's keeping me alive, basically. And she could do the same for you. So go check out the Hyde Park Care Pharmacy, which is locally owned, locally operated, locally loved. They'll look after you well. Hello, Carol. Thanks for the support.
We should also thank Trisha Lister, who I finally have gotten her last name right, and also to Molly Maid. Make your home a healthy haven. Call Molly Maid London today.
Is Trisha related to Molly?
No, because Molly's last name is Maid.
Oh, okay. It's different family. Family.
Yes.
Just colleagues.
What's Molly's middle name?
I don't know.
That I don't know.
We'll have to send it. Listeners, if you got the answer on that, send it in. Text us, call us, send us a smoke signal. What is the middle name of Molly Maid?
Molly Maid. Well, guys, we're going to bring Michael here in just a minute. Let's check in though, because we want to find out what we've been doing. Because I mentioned Ian had a little bit of a break last week, a little summer vacation. Where were you?
I went up to Georgian Bay to stay in a sort of resort cottage area. It was really nice. It was super nice to just relax and sort of not be worried about, what's on my computer, what I have to do, what plans I have to set and finish and things like that. It was just really nice to chill. I read a lot of books. I'm looking up because that's where all my books are. And it was really nice.
Good man.
Well,
were you on the water? Like, were you on the water?
Like right on the water.
Yeah. Like any water sports or things on the water that you got to do that you hadn't done before?
No, it was mostly just like relaxing. We jumped in the lake and swam to this like rock that was sort of while a pool length, a football field, I guess a distance out from the dock, and swam there a couple of times because it was just really, really nice.
Before we started recording, Rob asked him if he heard a loon when he was up there, and he said no. And I said, that's not possible. I know your dad, and he was with you. Well, so what you said you did some reading. What was your best reading? What'd you like?
I am such a sucker for the Percy Jackson series, and then they have the Heroes of Olympus series, which is what I'm reading now. I finished The Lost Hero, The Son of Neptune in like 2 days.
Wonderful.
Which are like, they're all like hefty books. And then I finished, when I got home on Saturday, I finished the Mark of Athena in 1 day, and I'm just trying to blaze through all these books because the story's really good, and I'm really enjoying it. Yeah,
good. Are there any movies of these Peter Jackson?
So Percy Jackson,
same guy, right? Brothers. They're brothers.
Yeah, brothers. So there's the Percy Jackson series where it focuses just on Percy, and it's from his point of view. And they made the Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief movie, which sucked. Don't watch it. It was awful. It had nothing to do with the books, and it was terrible. And it was just bad. And then they made a second one, which tried to fit the next 4 books in that series into one movie, which also sucked. But they're making a live action Netflix series, I think, of the Percy Jackson series. So read the books. They're really, really good. They're like on level with Harry Potter, in my opinion.
Ooh, wow. That's high praise, man.
Wow, that is. Yeah.
Really good.
Good stuff.
All right. Good stuff. What about you, Kevin? What have you been up to?
Well, I discovered coffee.
God.
I'm going to be I'm going to be 50 in a few months.
Run.
And for the first time in my life, I'm drinking coffee. I feel like I wake up in the morning and the first thing I want to do is fill my mouth with coffee beans. It's amazing.
Because I sent I don't know if you saw it, Ian, you were away, but I think I sent a tweet out that said, because Kevin needed to find a bit more energy in his day.
It's amazing.
He decided to start drinking coffee.
It is amazing stuff. So my preferred bean is from Jumping Bean Coffee Company, which is a Newfoundland, locally owned out there thing. They're totally environmentally friendly in terms of they have a low carbon footprint in how they roast the beans, fair trade. They even make those little things that go into those little single coffee makers that are totally compostable. Nice. It's just an incredible outfit. My cousin Suzanne and her husband Steve own a franchise out there, a coffee shop, Jumping Bean Coffee. And you can pick up the coffee at Sobeys here locally in this area. You can buy the beans. And I'm on the deep dark roast. Deep dark roast. Very good. Woo! That's what I've been at, man. That and trying to get ready for church in September, which I'm sure you are too.
Oh yeah, that's I've been lost in the minutia of what it is to make reservations to come to church on Sunday. Yeah. It's like this. At first I thought, okay, we'll just take names and people will come. Oh no, this is a whole thing now. This is like there's 100 different things that could possibly go wrong.
I can see where this is headed too, which is, no, I can't get you in on Christmas Eve, but I have a table for 2 on Christmas Day.
Yeah, exactly. I can get you in by the nativity window for 3, but 2 just not going to work for you on Christmas Eve. Advent 4 is open though, if you'd like a couple of spots in the back. Yeah. So, this is going to be fun.
This is where we're at.
All right, time now for what's becoming quite, I understand, a fun event for our listeners.
This is a big segment.
This is a big thing now. It's time once again, folks, for Sickness or Suds.
Sickness or suds? What's this all about, Rob?
So I'm going to give you a word or phrase. You gentlemen have to, and our guest if he was here, but he's not right now, you have to tell me whether the word or phrase is a sickness or a sud. In other words, a beer.
Nice, it's cold.
Because we like to call beer a sud.
Once in a while. Plus, it has good alliteration with sickness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our word today is meckle. Meckle. Would you more be apt to hear the sentence, barkeep, give me a pint of meckle? Or would you be more apt to hear something like, not doing too well, I've come down with the meckle?
What?
So meckle, is it a sickness or sad? Ian will give you the first crack at it.
Can can you spell Meckel?
Oh, there's a good. And now we're on the spelling bee questions.
Meckel.
Michael.
Ooh,
Meckel.
E-L. Ooh, that changes my opinion drastically.
Country of origin.
Country of origin. Germany.
Ooh, that's a giveaway there.
No, I'm just making that up.
Oh, okay.
Meckel. E-L. I'm gonna say
Meckel.
it's a sud.
It's a sud.
Oh, I don't think so.
All right.
I
All
think
right.
I think it's a sickness. I picture myself saying, well, I went to the doctor. She did a thorough examination. Digits were involved, and she had to check a few of my orifices, but she finally found out what's been troubling me all this time is I have the Meckel.
You have a few orifices?
Well, we all have some.
You got bigger problems than the Meckel, my friend. So, okay, so Ian's going with sud.
I'm going with
and
sud.
Kevin's
Sickness.
going
Sickness.
with sickness.
It's a sickness.
And so the answer is Meckel is a sickness.
Wow.
More, to be honest, a syndrome. It's called Meckel syndrome.
Okay.
And it's characterized by abnormalities of different organs or parts of your body, which
See?
part of, you're talking about digits, part of Meckel syndrome is that you can end up having more fingers and toes than the usual 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. See?
Yeah.
We're
That's pretty
doing
cool.
our best to educate people here about these things.
Meckel syndrome.
We're all about knowledge here.
So that's sickness and suds. And if there's anybody still watching, it's time now for our next segment, which is called
Ask Ian anything.
Oh.
Another question coming Ian's way today, Kevin. From
Oh, yeah.
where and what is our question?
Question today comes from Lukenbach, Texas. This one's from Waylon. So Waylon has emailed from Lukenbach. I, by the way, have been to Lukenbach, Texas. It's pretty small. But Waylon, he's got a computer right there in the back country, and he sends in this question. If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be?
That's a pretty big question.
You got it, Pontiac.
Well, it's kind of, you can't just be like, oh, I give myself, abs, or like, because a lot of things are you have to like work towards, like when it comes to like abs and things like that sort of aspect, like, oh, I want a bigger arms, like just work out if you can and figure that out. I don't know. It'd be cool. That's a really tough question. What would I, because like you can, I think learning to love yourself for who you are is more important than trying to figure out like, oh, I think I should change, my arms or my legs or my, like, the way that I think or whatever. So it's kind of difficult to be like, yeah, because everyone should learn to love who they are, or, understand who they are. Yeah.
Billy
So
don't go changing.
That's good.
Try and please me.
Please me. Do. Billy Joel.
Love you just the way you are.
Yeah, Billy
Yeah.
Joel. Yeah. What about you, Robbie?
What would I change? I would change the fact that I am incredibly impatient. I would like to have a little more patience.
Yeah.
Which is another song, isn't it? Who sang that song
Yeah.
about patience? I sometimes I just, I just want things to be done and finished and over with. And, I'm not, I admit one of my foibles is to not be able to just take the time and let things come together as they're supposed to. I want it done tomorrow or yesterday.
Yeah.
What
so
about you?
COVID's not really your favorite thing.
No, COVID's not. His
No,
favorite
could
thing.
we get rid of the COVID, please?
Well, I'd have to say that those who know me know that I also lack patience. It's interesting that you say that, because I think that, and the one I was thinking of is similar in that it's not impatience, but it's impulsiveness.
Mhm.
So, and so I think that if I could change it, I would, but not too much. Because one of the things I think, like, just to turn this back on you, Rob, is the fact that you're impatient also means that you're willing to work diligently to get things done and make sure,
Mhm.
when something's wrong, that it's, rather than just letting it all lie. So, I
Yeah.
mean, these things have a bit of a double edge to them. And sometimes my impulsivity is what allows my creativity. But at the same time, sometimes my impulsivity gets me in a lot of shit.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so,
Yeah.
so if I could change anything about me, I think I would change that so that I would stop and think perhaps a little bit more before I get.
Yeah.
off
And
the rails.
oftentimes being impatient is about realizing that there's lots to get done,
Yes.
which is not a good thing on its own either, because the truth of the matter is we can't do everything.
Mm-mm.
You got to be able to stand back and say, look,
That's it.
if it doesn't all get done today, it's okay.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah. So, all right. Very good. Well, it's time. I think Michael Weir is knocking on the Zoom door to come into the Vickers Crossing. So guys, let's bring Michael in right now. And our guest has joined us in our Zoom room here at the Vickers Crossing. So we're happy to welcome Michael Weir in to join us today. Michael, how are you?
I'm doing well. Good to be with you. Thanks for
All
having
right.
me on.
Hey, you're welcome. Good to see you.
Great to bring an American to Canada. Hey,
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's very good.
About,
Eh?
about 4 years ago, there was going to be a whole surplus of Americans coming over to Canada. I
Yeah.
haven't seen too many of them make the move yet, but who knows? Who knows?
I always love coming up north. I'm from Buffalo, New York, and
Oh,
so
you're
spend a lot of
you're
time
practically
in
Canadian
Canada.
anyway.
Basically, I've had enough Tim Hortons coffee to be Canadian. I'll tell you that much.
Are you a
Good
are
man.
you a are you a Sabres fan?
I am. I'm a
All right.
Sabres fan.
All right.
And the Toronto Blue Jays are playing in our minor league baseball stadium
that's
right
right.
now,
That's
which is pretty
That's
fun.
true. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So
that's great.
they're going back to the Royal Blue, right? Buffalo is going back to the Sabres are going back to the Royal Blue uniforms. So
It's going to be beautiful. It's
Yeah.
going to be
That's
beautiful.
fantastic.
Unlike the team itself, but at least they'll look good.
there's always
Look
next year. People in
That's
Canada
right.
here say that about the Leafs, and I say it about my Habs. And Rob
Yeah.
here grew up in a border town too, down in Windsor. So
That's
you
right.
guys-
I was on the Windsor-Detroit border for a number of years. So
Okay.
Yeah.
and a Red Wing fan. Couldn't go far enough down the 401 in Ontario to reach Toronto too often. So we would get all the Red Wing games, obviously, and watch that.
And the good news is Rob and I met when we were both in Windsor as clergy, and Rob introduced me to the Detroit Lions and made me a fan. So I have an affinity for Bills fans too, and we know what this is all about. So
Yeah, I apologize to Kevin for that every day.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway.
Just real quickly, my favorite ball player growing up was Desmond Howard, who played for the Lions for like a year or two.
Of
Yeah.
So I
course,
became
yeah.
a Lions fan because I
Yeah.
just kind of followed him
That's great.
around.
Yeah, I remember
yeah.
him, and that's great. Heisman winner. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
should. I mean, we could probably have a podcast like this on sports alone. It sounds like Michael's got it all figured
Yeah.
out. So
Yeah, that's great. Well, no, we're so glad you're here, Michael. We want to get into some other things other than sports. So I'm going to
All
let
right.
Kevin introduce you
Yeah.
formally
Well,
to
if
our
we have
listeners
to.
here. Yeah, if we have to. Yeah.
Michael, we're glad you're here. Let me say a word about you from all these incredible glowing bios that are online for you. Michael Ware is a leading strategist, speaker, and practitioner at the intersection of faith, politics, and public life, which makes you fit right into our wheelhouse here at the Vickers Crossing, where we talk about faith in the public square. Michael has advised Obama, as well as some of the nation's leading foundations, nonprofits, and public leaders on some of the thorniest issues and exciting opportunities that define American life today. He has argued that the spiritual health and civic character of individuals is deeply tied to the state of our politics and public affairs. You will find Michael with the AND campaign, where he's a chief strategist and a member of the executive team. He's also a founder of Public Square Strategies, LLC, a sought-after firm that helps religious organizations and political organizations. Michael's a senior fellow at the Trinity Forum. Michael is author of Reclaiming Hope, Lessons Learned in the Obama White House about the Future of Faith in America, and he's co-authored now this book called, where is it?
I got it. Here
Compassion
it is.
and
Look at that.
Conviction. You want to hear something really good? I held this up on FaceTime to my brother. I'm from Newfoundland. I don't know if you've been out that far or not, but my other brother, Daryl, I held this up and I said, look at this. And he goes, what's that about? which I thought was very funny. Compassion and conviction. What's that about? Oh, this is about anger and pain. What do you think?
That's right.
Anyway, there's a whole bunch of other things, but you'll find Michael in the New York Times, the Atlantic. He's written and commented on so many things. We're just so excited to have you here. I can't believe a guy as young as you has done all that. Makes me feel very sad about my life, but thanks for joining us.
Yeah, really great to be on. Looking forward to the conversation.
Well,
sport.
All right. Well, good. Well, look, right off the hop, we have to ask you. This is for those who are listening to this, because it'll probably drop next week. This is day 2 of the GOP convention. We're into Tuesday of this week. Last night was the introductory night. I know you were watching because I was watching your live tweets as you were going through it. So we got to get your hot take. Stephen Colbert last night on his live show likened it to watching a snake devour the Republican Party, which I thought was a pretty good analogy or metaphor. So tell me, have you come out from under the bed after Guilfoyle screamed her guts out? Give us your impression of the first night. I mean, us Canadians, we're watching this like we watch hockey, buddy.
Yeah, this is like popcorn. Get the popcorn.
Tell us about it.
I'm glad you can have that kind of distance. Look, so
it was going to be about hope and unity. Now, just to be clear, we did hear from the president that this, as opposed to the darkness of the Democratic thing, which we'll get to, it was going to be about hope and unity. So,
that really came through.
How did they do?
So it is Donald Trump's party through and through, and so that's what we saw last night. Even figures like former Secretary to the UN, Nikki Haley, who during 2016 had said some really critical things of Trump, was now making full-throated endorsements, as is to be expected at a convention nominating him. But I thought Senator Scott was a bit more reserved, and I appreciated. I've done events with Senator Scott. I know him pretty well. We disagree, obviously, on quite a bit, including some of what he had to say last night. I did appreciate, if you watch the closing of his remarks, it wasn't like what Donald Trump Jr. said, which Donald Trump Jr. said, and I'm only slightly paraphrasing here. He said, if we elect Donald Trump, if you want a good life with a nice family and with a nice home and a perfect family, you can have it with Donald Trump. That's
wow.
Interested in the 5-point plan that's going to deliver on that. Tim Scott closed his speech saying, I've laid out some, and obviously I'm actually paraphrasing here. He said, I've laid out some ideas, some principles, some arguments. If this is the kind of America you want, the Republican ticket is the best way to vote for that. That's a healthy political argument. Now,
yes.
I could pick apart different aspects of it. He did accuse Biden, of all people, of wanting to pursue a socialist utopia. But that's that's politics.
Does he know what utopia means? Because that sounds pretty good to me.
That's right. Yeah. So I appreciated Scott's comments. I do think it's important. There was a really telling moment, which I think should be applied to other aspects of the convention. Trump was in, I believe, the East Room of the White House speaking with frontline healthcare workers. And he made a joke about hydroxychloroquine. And he made a reference to it. That when I look on Twitter and when I watch CNN, they show like a clip of him saying something like that. And it's like, what a disgrace. Yeah. How could he possibly? And yet everyone in that room laughed at his joke.
Yeah.
And it was like a really important reminder to me, but also I think to others who are watching, to analysts and Democratic strategists and all that kind of thing, that not everyone is looking at what he says through the same lens that you are. That some things that you laugh at, they take seriously, and his supporters take seriously, and some things that you take seriously, his supporters feel like they're in on the joke. And so there were several speakers that I felt like, you know, it would be really easy for Democrats to dismiss this, but they better be careful. Herschel Walker, for instance, I thought was a very compelling speaker. He actually gave more of a personal testimony to Donald Trump and who Donald Trump is than Donald Trump Jr. did, which I thought was odd. But you know, the Trump campaign is going to try and peel off, especially Black and Hispanic men. And they have a shot at doing that if Democrats aren't careful, and if Democrats just sort of dismiss any kind of appeal that Trump and Republicans make to these voters. And that was clearly a focus of last night. So, I mean, we'll see how this builds. I thought the revisionism around Trump's response to COVID was ridiculous. Obviously, Guilfoyle. You know, as someone pointed out on CNN, I think that, you know, that was pre-recorded. And the fact that no one was like, hey, you want to like run that again? Like,
they pre-recorded it and they decided to show it.
Yeah, like, let me give you some notes. We could.
Now you've advised the president. I mean, is there nobody in the room to say, no, you don't want to run this?
Apparently
not in Trump's room,
not when you're the, not when you're, and I'm sorry, I don't know all the details. I don't stay up on all the, like, you know, the gossip of politics. But I believe she's either married to or dating Donald Trump Jr. Or one of the Trumps. And she's finance director. So yeah, when you have the money and when you're in a relationship with the family, then people might be a little more hesitant. But yeah, you got to look out for the bigger picture there. I don't know if they did her any favors.
Well, I'm reminded of years ago, and you're too young to remember this probably, but I'm sure you know about it, being as involved in the Democratic Party as you are. But Michael Dean screaming, or Howard Dean, sorry, Michael, Howard Dean screaming, "Woo!"
I was deeply invested in that campaign. Not for Dean. I was pretty happy that Dean did that. I was invested in other ways. But yeah, no, that's infamous, and thank goodness Guilfoyle isn't running for anything, or else I think she'd be ending that campaign too.
The interesting thing you point out there is how there's a whole bunch of people who don't laugh at who laugh at things that he thinks are funny and don't laugh. The reflection I have is we don't. Thanks be to God, I don't get Fox News, but I do visit their webpage because I like to know what's, and there's two different Americas in my opinion. I mean, it's if you're in that echo chamber, then that's all you ever know. I mean, you that's reality to you.
Yeah, and you know, there are things that I think need to be dismissed outright, and then there are other things I just don't feel like Democrats give adequate responses to, that they actually dismiss too quickly. I understand the rationale of why you would keep churches closed and allow grocery stores to open. I'm a little less clear on why casinos are open outside of a capitalistic sort of, you know, casinos are producing profit and have lobbyists and that kind of thing. But that there hasn't been, you know, that some of these governors are just releasing, you know, their 5-phase plan, and churches are in like phase 5, and don't offer any particular kind of explanation other than, you know, all this is driven by the science, and like that's not sufficient. It's not sufficient politically, clearly. Like you ought to have the wisdom to know Republicans are going to go after this. But then I just think from just the fact of the matter, like that deserves explanation. Well, why? Well, not only, you know, the Republicans did a lot last night to pit sort of the protests against churches being closed, which I think is harmful and despicable. So I'll put that to the side. But I think it's fair for people to be like, why can I wait in line at Target or at Home Depot and I can't worship in my church in, you know, month 8 of this crisis in America? So there are things like that. I thought a few other lines of argument last night. I mean, I think the charter school argument is a common argument that the Democratic base isn't as aligned on as you would think. And so Republicans have long used that issue to pull off Democratic voters. And part of that is because sort of the National Democratic Party isn't often willing to get into the weeds there because it's too complicated for them. So yeah, I think that the Republicans moved the ball a bit forward on day one. I'm interested to see how they build on it politically. Substantively, I obviously had some serious problems, but we'll see how things go from here.
All right. On the other complete side of that was the Democratic National Convention last week, which is complete now. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that because in your work as well, it's not just about politics, it's about faith as well. And there was certainly a focus on faith during the Democratic National Convention. And I was reading some of your review on those days last week, especially the fourth day, and wanted to ask your take on that. I know that the focus on faith came from a lot of different places. James Martin offered a prayer in which he prayed for opening our hearts to those in need and the unemployed and the immigrant and the people of color. Pete Buttigieg talked about healing of not excluding people. Biden's background as a Catholic was brought up, and there was a rabbi that came in to offer a prayer as well. So there's a lot of different aspects of that. So just want to get your reflection on that night and faith and how that played a part of the Democratic National Convention and how you think it worked or didn't work for them.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been doing this a long time and advocating for a more faith-forward approach. And even I was surprised by, I mean, basically the first 40 minutes of the Democratic Convention were faith-centered. And I think it shows, I think strategically it shows an attentiveness to how Donald Trump is going to, basically the only way he has to win this election, which is to paint Democrats as a-religious, to use religion against Democrats. And I think Democrats did a decent job of buffering themselves against that during the convention. I think it's a reflection of the man that Democrats nominated. And so I think it was a fair reflection of Joe Biden. And I think it was indicative of the kind of team he has around him. I think if you can watch the convention last week and compare it to the convention in 2016, and if you still want to try and tell me that that the election all came down to Comey and Russia, and that there's nothing Democrats could have done to strengthen their case, then I just don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's just clear as day. I got through the Democratic convention, and it was clear to me that Biden was asking for the votes of people of faith, in addition to others. Now, that doesn't mean that people of faith are going to say yes. That's not. But the invitation was extended, which is absolutely critical in politics. And so, I think that was powerful. The other thing I pointed out in my, so I think you're referring to I run a newsletter with my wife at reclaiminghope.substack.com. And one thing I discussed in my post on day 4 was just the idea that, there's a political side of, religious rhetoric has a political impact, and we know that. And as an analyst, like I'm responsible for looking at the practicalities of how that works. As a Christian, what I want to guard people against is this idea that we ought to be looking at politics and sort of deciding who we vote for by like who mentions God the most, and have like a little tally mark system, and like they mentioned God like 2 more times than the other folks, I guess I'm going there. That we don't, as Christians, we should not be going to politics for that sort of cultural and personal sort of affirmation.
I mean, it makes a good drinking game, but it's not the best way to make your faith decisions. Like every time they say something, take a shot. No.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you're gonna end up in a stupor in more ways than one if you, if you do
Big
that.
time.
You know, but that doesn't mean that it's meaningless. So when you know when the convention had entire segments about the role that faith has played in social movements in this country, then that says something about the way that they view the value of faith in public life. That has policy implications that folks should hold them to. It provides sort of additional leverage when you know, faith rhetoric, like all other rhetoric, you ought to be looking at it for what kind of leverage, what kind of commitment there is that you can hold politicians accountable to. That's why we, you know, pay attention to that, not because we're looking to have like the right, you know, the right Christian leader quoted, or, you know, our favorite passage of scripture read. You know, that's going to have a natural effect, but we ought to try and guard against that as much as we can.
I wonder, as think about that, you were actively, I mean, reading Reclaiming Hope, you were 19 when you got involved with Obama's first campaign?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
That's just wild. And when you started working in the White House, how old were you?
I usually want to answer this question, but now that I'm getting older, it makes me feel younger to say it. I was 20.
You were 20 years old.
Oh my gosh, dude!
Working at 21 years old as an advisor to President Obama on issues of faith and outreach and so on. You took on a vital role though in that 2012 campaign in terms of that outreach, and I want to follow up, I guess, because my memory of it was that again, as a priest watching American politics, is that Obama didn't shy away from his faith in either of the two campaigns, quite frankly, and that it did seem to be that an appeal was made to people of faith. I'll use that broadly to mean even more than Christians, but to make that appeal to say to people, and I really like what you said in your blog, you and your wife, about holding them people of faith have something to pin that commitment to, pin their hopes on, to be able to say, well, look, this is the conversation you had as you ran. And so do you get a sense that, you know, and I know you're familiar with whoever is doing this work for Biden right now, but do you get a sense that same sort of effort is being made? Because that, I quite agree with you that I think there is, I know they're not going to win the majority of the evangelical vote. However, there are many people of faith, and I think what we're seeing across America, and certainly here in Canada, is mainline Christians, particularly those of us who are more, I hate the labels, but progressive or liberal or whatever. I think we're becoming increasingly more organized and more vocal about how a role for faith in the public square. So do you get a sense that it's more that Biden's team is a little more intentional? I mean, you're right that I think Hillary just avoided it, ignored it, and like Wisconsin, she forgot it was there.
Yeah, no, I think that's sadly exactly right. I think President Obama's attention to it is a major reason why he won. I think Clinton's inattention and the cold shoulder that was given to faith is a major reason she lost. And I think Biden, his team is corrected from that. I think they're on the right track. There's more work to be done. I do think the convention was pivotal. I mean, that was, you know, it's one thing to be doing private calls and to, you know, behind the scenes stuff, and that's important. It's another to actually lead with it, and the indication that's there that you're not afraid of talking about faith, that you're not afraid of the role that faith plays in the country. You know, I will be looking for another moment or two between now and the election, whether it's former Vice President Biden giving explicitly a faith speech, sort of giving some sense of his view of faith in America in a slightly more extended way. He's not Barack Obama. He's not going to give a 45-minute, you know, treatise on the subject, but maybe a 25-minute speech or some kind of interview with a major religious
Christian
leader that
broadcasting.
sends a message, and so yeah. But they're on the right track.
It's
You know, the
interesting.
addition of Kamala Harris to the ticket, I think, adds some additional
Yeah.
questions, particularly for moderate and conservative religious voters that I don't think is impossible for them to answer. They just have to be newly attentive to some issues that were that you could draw from Biden's record to get to have a good sense of where he was.
Right.
But now that Harris is in the mix,
Yeah.
they need to, I think, be clear about who's leading the ticket,
Right.
about sort of what their vision for religious freedom in particular is, whether they'll be absorbing some of Harris's policies from her campaign, some of which were just relatively extreme, or you know, whether she's joining Biden's ticket. I think they've started to send some of those signals. I mean, the campaign hasn't all of a sudden, you know, changed their policy page
Right.
to, but those are questions that religious voters deserve, and American people generally deserve answers to.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think you're right. I mean, I think that it means something because if President Trump is saying words like Joe Biden is going to hurt God, then clearly he sees it as a sensitive thing because he's a very thin-skinned individual who's threatened by anybody. And so what he sees in front of him is a genuine man of faith, which of course he is not. And so he attacks, which is sort of what he does. I think that there might be more purchase with someone like Kamala Harris, perhaps, who doesn't have the same. I mean, but Biden, Chris Coons, it was Chris Coons, right, who gave his testimony basically about Biden. But anyway, to move on from all that, because we just thought we couldn't have you on without talking about those two. But I just love the hope and unity and good news and light that's coming out of the GOP convention this week. It's I'm putting on a hockey helmet and I'm watching night 2. so I read both Reclaiming Hope and Compassion and Conviction, both great books, and I encourage our readers to pick them up. You're very gifted and you're quite impressive. We will get to the AND campaign and Compassion and Conviction in a bit, but I wanted to just pull out one small part from Reclaiming Hope, which is not really fair because the book is incredible. But the thing I wanted to pull out was relative to what's happening right now, which is around, the importance and the sacredness of our democratic franchise and what you folks have in America, this great experiment called America, which has been held up as a pinnacle for democracy. You write that voting is at the very heart of citizenship and of our system of governments. I can think of few more significant challenges to hope as it relates to our politics than efforts to restrict voting rights and basic access to the voting booth, particularly insofar as these efforts are tailored to affect specific racial and economic classes of people. These kinds of policies are an injustice that must be opposed by all Americans if we wish to claim with full sincerity that we are a nation governed by its people. In light of what's happening right now, it may not be the voting booth, but it's the extension of that, which is the mail-in ballots. What's happening in the USPS with DeJoy and the very clear sort of efforts being made, and President Trump is vocally saying out loud that he doesn't want to fund the thing because he doesn't want the mail-in ballots to actually get to their destination. He's casting doubt on all of it. He's casting doubt on the validity of it. Do you have confidence that the people will be able to keep their franchise, get their votes in? And I suppose, what's your confidence level that Trump will accept the results of the election?
Well, I think it requires vigilance. And this is not an area that we can afford sort of squishy language, where we can afford uncertainty. I mean, I think in the book, and certainly in sort of remarks I've made around the country over the last few years, we can't ask for people. It is very hard to ask for people to work within the democratic process, as opposed to resorting to violence or some of what we're seeing in some American cities. Now, very, very difficult for me to press on them. There are civic ways of working this out. I know that there are injustices going on, but you could have your voice heard if from the highest office in the land, we have someone who's casting doubt on whether they can be heard.
That's
if
right.
in states like North Carolina, there's explicitly racist voter disenfranchisement going on. I mean, it's there in the court documents that there's no sort of like room for interpretation for political purposes. I mean, like, to be clear, if these voters were voting for Republicans, I don't think they'd be working to disenfranchise them. So I think the principal motivation is political, but the racial consequences are baked into that.
Well, he has said out loud, hasn't he, that it's okay in Florida.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's so it's going to require vigilance. I am supportive of multiple efforts that are making sure that we have lawyers staffed up throughout the election process, that we have, it's going to be very important, especially during the pandemic. We need young poll workers in America. So if there are Americans listening, young Americans listening, senior citizens, we have a sense who are sort of the majority, make up a percentage of the poll workers. We have a sense that for their health and for their safety, we're going to see some attrition there. We're going to need young people to step up in a safe way, with as much in as protected a way. But this is our democracy. This is how we function as a society. And then, I'll just be blunt. My hope is that the election results leave absolutely no doubt as to who won the election.
Right. It has to be a big win. Yeah.
It needs to be a big win. Our democratic institutions have been tested in these last 3.5 years.
Eroded.
I think that they've held up okay. I think it will be another big test that, frankly, I don't want to see if we have a sitting president who's contesting election results, who has not shown in his character, in his sense of service, any sense that he needs to sacrifice for the public good or not pursue anything but his sort of maximal personal interest to uphold the dignity of the office. Those kinds of claims just don't seem to have much effect on him. So I want to avoid this scenario altogether.
I have to ask, because there's going to be lineups, big lineups. At least we hope there will be, that people will go vote. I read in Reclaiming Hope that the 19-year-old Michael Ware showed up at the lineups and sang some, soul, R&B?
Yeah. And hey, if I need to be out there again this year, socially distanced, I will. Though that was a long time ago. I don't know if I have the courage and audacity of a 19-year-old, 20-year-old kid anymore. But
Michael, you got a mask on this time. Who's going to know?
Yeah, that's right. The lines are, in some way, it's good. It's folks who are committed to voting. As I point out in the book, the places where we have lines are just another show of sort of the racial inequality and the sort of political ways, politically motivated inequities in our voting system. I'd be in Liberty City, Florida, which is one of the poorest sections of Florida, significant Democratic votes, and these folks are waiting for 8 hours. I can guarantee you in Boca Raton,
they ain't having it.
Folks aren't waiting 8 hours to vote.
No lineups in the Hamptons, eh?
Yeah, that's not happening there, and that's another one of those unacceptable things that I mean, look, we just gotta spend. This is America, we just gotta spend it. Like, it's only one day a year. We find money for. We gotta spend as much money as necessary so that folks have access to the ballot. That's it. That's the whole functioning of our government. I don't care if there are so many things the government does that if they get stalled out for a little bit, if they're not functioning as well, to me that's more acceptable than the vote not functioning for the
Right,
people. If
right,
that's
right.
not working, nothing else is working.
Exactly, exactly. I want to give people a little taste of compassion and conviction, which we held up a little bit earlier, and a really good
What's
book.
that? What's that book about, Rob?
The AND Campaign's Guide to Faithful Civic Engagement. What is that about, Kevin?
Yeah,
Compassion and conviction
What is that
together.
about?
Yeah, no, it's a really good read for those that and I know there's a lot out there, and a time for me when I was starting in ministry as well, thinking, what's my faith have to do with politics, and how do I engage the two, and should I keep them separate, or are they together, and what's that all about? So this is a real good read for folks that are even struggling with that a little bit and trying to find their place in it. But I wanted to just quote a little part that I highlighted and ask you about it, Michael. So in Compassion and Conviction, you write that we hear a lot of disheartening stories about politics and politicians. So true. But there are also many encouraging stories, stories in which the needy are supported and society is improved because of kind-hearted advocacy and thoughtful policy decisions. Refusing to engage civically is failing to steward the things that God has placed in our sphere of influence. That's so important. How can we be salt and light if we have no contact with society, especially in an arena with such significant and broad impact on society? Christians should engage politics because doing so provides us with a robust opportunity to love our neighbor by acting justly, promoting human flourishing, and seeking the prosperity of our entire communities. So that, in a nutshell, is excellent. So the AND campaign is an organized effort to allow for conversation, action, engagement that allows for biblical values, social justice, things like that. And you're reminding people in the book, and just in that paragraph, that faith is really more important than politics. It starts with that. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about that and why that's important.
Yeah, so I co-authored this book with my brothers Justin Giboney and Chris Butler. The AND Campaign is a Christian civic organization, as you said, that is serving as a vehicle for Christians who understand that politics is important and also understand it's not ultimate. Um, but, and part of that is understanding, as I said before, that we don't go to politics for self-interest. We don't go to politics for our own self-aggrandizement, but we do have, by virtue of being citizens, political responsibility. I think there's so often this rhetoric in Christian circles that sort of, in some Christian circles, that gosh, if politics is so dirty, I just don't want to give it any legitimacy by the virtue of my participation.
Right.
No, you're a citizen. You're already participating. The choice you have is about how to steward the influence you've already been given. You're not any less complicit because you're not voting or because you ignore sort of the ways that politics affect your neighbors than those who are engaged, even if imperfectly. And so the book lays out a framework for Christians to think about politics without sort of being with some help to avoid being sort of manipulated by a very powerful, very persuasive political system that we have in this country, and to stay on the narrow path, to be faithful even as they engage in a pluralistic society in a very complex system. The book is very much rooted in scripture. It's very practical, almost hyper practical. There are small group discussions and exercises at the end of each chapter, so it's a great resources for families and small groups and that kind of thing. And yeah, we've just been, the book came out last month. We've been hearing great feedback, and we really wanted to offer it as a resource to the church. And what we knew was going to be, obviously the next 10 weeks are going to be pivotal in the States, but politics isn't going anywhere. This is something that the church has to figure out in a way that brings about unity and not division, in a way that reflects a faithful witness and not one that's sort of succumbed to political influence.
Right. No, and I highly suggest it as a book study in parishes and faith communities, to sit down over a cup of coffee or an adult beverage and just hash this stuff out, right? And be honest with each other and see where those conversations lead.
Yeah.
I think the thing that strikes me is and just for those of us in Canada, those in Canada listening to the podcast, it's an American resource, but the principles that are in here are bigger than that. Like, I mean, we've just had a leadership convention here in Canada, just wrapped up on the weekend. It took them 8 hours to. Sounded very American, actually. They had
If you
these
thought
machines.
Florida was bad, you should have been around here
They had
last
these.
week.
They had machines that ripped up the mail-in ballots, and they couldn't get it counted. So their 6:30 program, and these are the Conservatives. Their 6:30 program that was supposed to start, they released their first results at nearly 1 a.m. the next day. So it was for anybody in PR stuff. This must have been just a total shit show. Pardon my French, but anyway, like the guy who's elected leader, his slogan is "Take Canada back." Which sounds a lot like "Make America Great Again."
Yeah, it's the mega.
Things we export. Yeah.
And like Rob and I have had a host of people on here. You've probably seen some of our previous guests, Michael, but you know, people like Jamie Smith and others who do this work and talk about all this. You know, Matthew Koenig. So Diana Butler Bass, all these folks, and this conversation is critical for us because, you know, we're in a minority government situation here in a parliamentary system. We could be going to an election any time. In fact, there's 2 confidence votes coming in the fall. So for Canadians, I just want to emphasize that the work that Michael and his group are doing in the AND campaign is important because it speaks to us as well. Those of us who have religious values that may be more liberal or progressive than perhaps some of the louder, more conservative evangelical groups. You know, we need to have these conversations in our, as Rob said, in our church groups, in our book studies, at our pub, wherever it is we're doing it. It's a critical conversation because it's coming here. If you think that what's happened in America can't happen here, I just want to sound an alarm.
And it starts in those grassroots levels in your parishes. For those that are watching us, that, you know, you got a church community of 50, you know, get 10 of them together and start working at this stuff, right? Because this is important. Yeah.
Because before you know it, you're watching a convention where people are screaming their guts out and talking about and talking about how to have a perfect family, and we don't want to get there. So,
Try and avoid that if you can.
So please, for the love of all that's holy, think about these things. I just want to. There's so much we could talk to you about, but the last sort of big one here is around. And then Rob will ask you about some of the non-writing work that you're doing. But as a senior fellow with the Trinity Forum, you've co-authored a piece called "Christianity, Pluralism, and Public Life in the United States: Insights from Christian Leaders." And again, I would say to people across countries, it's certainly here in North America because pluralism, you know, we live a similar culture. Yeah. It's really about the influence of what Christian leaders and the insights that Christian leaders would have around pluralism. You write in there, one source of meaning from which Americans, and I would add to that Canadians, have drawn wisdom, answers, and directions in the past is Christianity. Its spiritual resources, its teaching, its intellectual tradition, its institutions, and the people who claim the faith for themselves. Today, what we know, however, as Charles Taylor describes, in A Secular Age, the value of faith in public life is increasingly contested. We live in a pluralized, pressurized moment, which stems from, and this is a quote of Taylor's here, a move from a society where belief in God is unchallenged and indeed unproblematic to one in which it is understood to be one option among others and frequently not the easiest one to embrace. Such a change does not mean that religion is no longer relevant, but rather that new questions are now salient, such as whether religion has answers to today's problems. Can you share with, and the report is free to download. I'd encourage people get it, but can you give our listeners a sense of what conclusions you came to and why this is important?
Yeah, I mean, the main conclusion, you know, we wrote this for 2 reasons, and I co-authored this with Dr. Amy Black at Wheaton, a political science professor at Wheaton, and with the support of the Democracy Fund. And we wrote this report for 2 reasons. One, we wanted to offer it as a resource for Christians and for the church in America that is beginning to ask deep questions about what sort of the next century of American life is going to look like in, as we talk about in the report, an increasingly pluralistic, increasingly diverse society. And wanted to encourage the church that our faith offers deep profound resources for living in difference. The early church was the model and has some relevance here. But then the second thing is, I do think in some quarters of society, the moral imagination that public secular leaders have for the role that Christianity is playing and can play in building a healthy pluralism, we wanted to expand that a bit. Increasingly in America, faith is viewed as part of the problem, not a part of the solution. I think factually, that's a limited and inaccurate way to think about it. As a practical matter, what does it mean if you have people in decision-making roles who view faith, which is held by about 70% of the American people, as part of the problem and not part of the solution? Well, that's going to set up an antagonistic, conflict-ridden environment. That's not going to be helpful for anybody. And so the report lays out from the value of and sort of what we can learn from various Christian sacraments to what Christian theology has to offer, to the way that Christian institutions are social glue in our communities in a very practical way, in terms of serving as a social safety net, in terms of helping to introduce and connect people who otherwise would never connect and be in relationship with one another. And that's what the report focuses on. Would encourage folks, especially church leaders. I do think the report's relevant in the Canadian context. Would encourage folks to check it out.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So we've talked a lot about the work you've done in your writing. You do some work too, talking, which is on your podcast. So I understand you got a couple going on. Can you tell our listeners what they are and maybe where they can find them and tune in?
Yeah. So the Church Politics Podcast is a podcast I co-host with Justin Gibney, who's my co-author on the book. And we talk about current events and politics through a biblical lens, through a Christian lens. And so that's generally a weekly podcast. And then sort of a seasonal podcast for the last probably a year now. I've been doing the Faith 2020 podcast, which looks at this election through the lens of faith. I'm one of a handful of people who's run religious outreach for a winning presidential campaign, and I sort of bring that experience to bear on what we're seeing unfold in this election, in the presidential election in the States right now. And so actually today, an episode went up probably while we were recording, where I unpacked the Democratic convention. We'll do one on the Republican convention. And I think part of what I've really liked about the Faith 2020 podcast is it's been interview driven, and we've been able to bring on people who I thought would be and have turned out to be real drivers of action in this presidential election, from Senator Chris Coons, who was one of our early guests, who had a national platform during the convention, as we discussed, to Josh Dixon, who's running religious outreach for the Biden campaign, to some of the leading journalists reporting on this election. And so yeah, you can check out both of those on iTunes, Spotify, really wherever you typically find podcasts.
Excellent. Good. Well, that's great. We've really enjoyed having you, Michael. Thanks so much. And I think Kevin's going to do some. Do you got prizes or giveaways?
I got prizes.
We got books.
Hey,
just thinking as I'm getting ready with the books quickly, Obama's speech at the convention. I mean, you work with the man, because I was blown away by it. I just thought it was incredible. But you got a sentence to say about that?
It was pure Obama. It was Obama extract. It was it was the guy that inspired me at 18, 19 years old to pack up and travel across the country and risk quite a bit to work for him. And so yeah, it was very good to see him, and I thought he delivered.
Yeah, Michelle did okay too.
Oh, she did okay.
Whoa! Wow! Yeah.
It's a real shame she hates politics, because my goodness,
oh my gosh,
she could win in a heartbeat. But You'll be able to hear a version of Michelle's speech tonight when Melania speaks.
Oh, yeah.
And, so we want to thank the people at InterVarsity Press, who's your publisher. And I'm trying to remember because she's been so helpful. Remind me of the name of the person I've been dealing with there.
So was it Krista? Might have been Krista.
Krista. It was Krista.
Okay,
It was
great.
Krista. Thank you, Krista, and the people at InterVarsity Press. They sent us a box of, I have 4 of these to give away.
Amazing.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a little fun on the internet. So on Facebook, on our Facebook page, our Twitter account, or if you want to email us at vicarscrossing@gmail.com. The question that I want you to answer, and then I'll throw all the names into one of my many hats on a weekend, and we'll pull a winner. We'll pull 4 winners. Is how old was our friend Michael Ware when he began working at the White House? That was said today on the podcast. I asked him that question. He gave an answer, and we'd like for you to just tweet that answer out, put it in a comment on Facebook, send us a note, send us an email, and you'll enter to win one of these 4 copies of this incredible resource, wonderful book by a wonderful group of people, and most especially to this great guy we've had with us. For those of us who geek out on religion and politics, this is like interviewing, like if you're a 1960s
At LaFontaine. It's like
it is.
At
It
LaFontaine.
Gilbert, Gilbert Perrault, and this is like having, if you're a stoner, this is like having Keith Richards on. Okay, so this is Michael Weir is the Keith Richards of faith in the public square.
Oh goodness!
No, you better tweet that today, Michael. That you've just called you are the Keith Richards.
I may have to go to Canada to find refuge. If
November 4th, buddy. We got a room for you. Last week it was Fu Lu from Texas who writes a book called Jesus of the East, telling us that he might be coming here in November. So we're gonna have to make a lot of room.
Yep, that's all right. We got room. Just before we let you go, Michael, just want to say hi and thank you to our sponsors here on the Vickers Crossing podcast. We got a lot of folks that really help us out and help us keep going here. To A. Miller George Funeral Home here in London, Ontario, to Hyde Park Care Pharmacy in London, and to Molly Maid as well. We thank them for their support. So, Michael, all the best to you. Good luck. We know you'll be watching tonight and this week, and as we get closer to the big day in November, maybe we can have you back after and do a wrap up down the road sometime.
Do a post-mortem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we hope it'll be a celebration podcast. Yeah.
So great to be with you. Thanks for the work you are doing in facilitating conversations on these important topics. You just had great guests on, and I was happy to join them.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Until we get together again on the Vickers Crossing, my name is Rob Henderson from Holy Trinity St. Stephen, and he is
Kevin George from St. Aidan's Church.
Okay. And remember, Kevin, to always look both ways
before you cross the street.
Thank you for listening. Our hosts are Kevin George and Rob Henderson. Our producer and composer is myself, Ian, with original artwork done by Elizabeth Dodman. If you have any questions or want to know where to find us, tweet us at Vickers Crossing or find us on Facebook at The Vickers Crossing. If you have any other questions about anything heard on this podcast, leave us a comment or look in the description to find out more. Thanks!